month of October and the few months ahead of us, we are continuing with our topic of enlightening messages. Today, Leo is going to be blessing us by discussing the topic joys and sorrows, and I don't want to take up any more time, but we do have announcements at the very end. But Leo, we just wanted to invite you up here and begin your beautiful talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And hopefully, yes, it will be beautiful. Not my talk, what we have to learn with our mentors, the mentors of this house, that allow us to be together once more. And as well, in receiving the messages that the spirits have brought to us. We went from let's say, a number of talks or meetings that we were bringing, let's say, chapters or discussion about enlightened books. And as we have said, Kirsten said very well, talking about now enlightening messages. And it is on this term that we also try to connect one thing to the other, as we did before too. More specific tonight, as we will talk about joys and sorrows, which is actually towards the end of the Spirit's book, which is the fourth part of the Spirit's book, and it's really the whole part of the book. This part of the book is called Hopes and Consolations, and then we go over earthly joys and sorrows. And you see the different topics that we talk. We're not going to cover all. We're not going to go over the whole thing, and then future joys and sorrows. Mainly because of obviously time, and secondly because it's an invitation for us to go back and read, because perhaps we may not have the fear of death, as we can see during the earthly joys and sorrows topic, but some of us have. Some of us may have antipathetic unions, so on and so forth, and then it's an invitation for us to study. This also can be found, these topics, in very great details right here on this book, Heaven and Hell, which will also bring parts of it tonight. But when we talk about these two words, joys and sorrows, right? If we were to ask ourselves, am I happy? Who is happy here? Okay. But then you start questioning it automatically, right? Because we're living in this day-to-day struggle that we say, I'm happy, but then I wish I could have this, I wish I could be there, I wish I could be next to this person, and we're not. So we kind of always balance this idea of happiness, and it's really hard for someone to describe even happiness, what this happiness is, of joy, what joy is, right? The same thing, when we just analyze ourselves, we always think about the difficulties of life, the sorrows of life that we encounter. This not only is individually, but also it's a collective feeling, right? When we ask, as we just ask one another here, a group of people will say, who is happy, who is not happy, and then we go from there. As we enter a new stage of our lives, this new transitory time that we're going through right now, even when we find ourselves in a happy moment, it can easily be, I don't want to say destroyed, but we ponder more if we then take a step to analyze the life of others. For example, if I'm having a healthy meal, right, we can easily remember the little ones or the other ones around the world who doesn't have, that food, right? So then our happiness, again, it's a little bit attacked by that unhappiness, right? Our sorrows, the same way, when we think about our difficulties of life, if we were to be wise enough, which hardly we are, and compare ourselves with less fortunate ones, then we see that our sorrows, our unhappiness is not so great. Do you see? And it takes time for us to even understand, okay, I get this, but what can I do? Or how can I reach this happiness, right? the philosophy goes on and on and on and on. And I'm sorry that if you were in a very, let's say, good part of your life today, that you did not have to think about this, and now here it is, Leo and Spiritism bringing all this idea of of happiness and not happiness, joy and sorrows. But here we are together, so we're invited one another to think, to actually question these things, and see where we are, because with these questions that we have, with the joys and the sorrows that we have, when we come in contact with this part over here, we'll see that nothing is by chance, number one. And number two, that we're evolving to this future joy that has nothing to do with the joys that we see on earth. Okay? Here's a quote that I came across when we were putting this together by the great poet Khalil Gibran. We choose our joys and sorrows long before we experience them. We choose our joys and sorrows long before we experience them. This quote invites us to do several things. Number one is to say, okay, well, if I'm joyful now, it's easy to say, well, I work hard to have the life that I have, the material life that I have, right? I went to school, I got a good job, and here I have the good life that I have. The same thing if we're saying, if we're weighing our happiness based on a good marriage. I have a good wife, I have a good husband, I have good kids because I worked for it, right? And we're still kind of debating on it if it's truly happiness, because there's everything. But if we're then analyzing the sorrows, it's kind of hard to find sometime, or most of the time, a reason for the sorrows that we're living in our lives nowadays, right? Because, okay, I was born without a limb. What did I do to learn to be born without a limb? Because based on this, I chose it. We chose it. And when we say I chose it, yes, perhaps not a direct way, thinking that I was doing the right thing, but I did, because now I'm reaping the consequences. And when we say we, it's because if I don't have a limb and I'm living with all of you together, just the presence of being next to someone who doesn't have a limb makes us wonder, makes us feel not sad, because today we have a different understanding of someone. I'm giving this example that came to mind. I mean, it could be anything, right? As we just mentioned, someone who doesn't even have food to eat. Where is the reason for this? Why so many people, they are deprived of so many things? So we have to accept what? There is a pre-existence. Something happened somewhere in time that I do not remember, but it's there. Because we'll see here, God being the supreme intelligence, he wouldn't create an individual that way where others he would be creating in a favorable way. So then we have to question again, is this really the supreme intelligence? You see, just for us to think, just for us to really analyze these things, because why do we have this? And I will say this over and over and over, because it's like our lives, right? Like generally in our lives, we go through the ups and downs, the swells of life. One time we're up here, another time we're down here. Sometimes it takes just a split of a second when someone says something that we do not like, and then we're unhappy again, and then we're feeling sad, right? And then joy comes up again when something goes along the way that I want them to go, right? Here's a question that Kardec asked the spirits in this fourth part of the book. Can human beings enjoy completely happiness while on earth? And we'll go back to it. Complete happiness. No. So you guys are not happy then. Okay, Jeanette, Jeanette is trying to justify because she raised her hand. Didn't you raise your hand when is it? You see, we're talking about completely happiness, and I get it. I get it. I'm not trying to, make anybody feel bad. We are happy, but it's to a certain degree based on the happiness that we grasp. And obviously, we have some knowledge of what we're talking about here because we have studied before, because we have analyzed. But I would say a great number of brothers and sisters who are incarnated on earth nowadays, sometimes they have this innate feeling that perhaps, what I'm going through is temporary, even though they do not know Spiritism, even though they don't accept the pre-existence of the soul, or even though they don't accept the continuation of the soul. Okay? And if we still in the ups and downs, even knowing this, perhaps we need to know more, we need to study more than those individuals. Because even though they don't know, they already have inside of them. And they keep working harder and harder and harder and harder to free themselves from the trials of life. But am I going to give the answer to you guys? Or if you know the answer, hold on to the answer, because we're going to take a detour. And the detour is to go deeper in this question. Why we're not happy in this life, completely happy here on earth? Or even in future lives, because the chapter, again, the part of the book, the fourth part of the book talks about the earthly joys and sorrows and future ones as well. Okay? So it could be here on earth, it could be someplace else. We never know. As we mentioned, this book, Heaven and Hell, is a great source as well if we're trying to go deeper into this teaching of joys and sorrows, because it talks about different topics. And the second part of the book is actually a collection of information about spirits who were living on Earth during the time that Kardec was actually putting this work together, and how they discarnate, and the evocations of these minds, as Daniel brought one of the cases here last week, on how they were in the afterlife, depending on how they lived their lives. And here it is. This part of the book, part 2, entitled Earthly Expiation, and it's on chapter 8, we get to come in contact with Marcel, the case of Marcel, the child in number 4. I'm going to read the first part of it so we get an idea what we're talking about. It's a little bit drastic, but let's go back to that what we have mentioned before. If we take the time to go deeper on the sorrows or difficulties of those individuals who are suffering more than we are, then we put ourselves not above them, but above that situation, and we feel a little bit joyful, right? So here's the case. Marcel, the child in number 4. In a provincial sanatorium, there was a boy of approximately 8 to 10 years old, whose condition was difficult to describe. He was designated as number 4. He was completely contorted, whether as the result of a congenital deformity or as the result of the disease itself. His twisted legs touched his neck, and he was so gaunt that his bones were about to tear through his skin. His body was covered with sores, and his sufferings was atrocious. He belonged to a poor Jewish family, and his sad condition had lasted 4 years. He was remarkably intelligent for his age. His sweetness, his patience, and his resignation were uplifting. The physician under whose care he had been placed was touched by compassion for the poor, nearly abandoned child. His parents seldom seemed to come to visit him and took a special interest in him. He enjoyed chatting with him, charmed by his intellectual precociousness, Not only did he treat him kindly, but when his duties would permit, he read to him and marveled at his rectitude of judgment on matters that seemed beyond his age. Someone that is completely, really, in a completely suffering, right? And we see this not exactly in the same way, but throughout life. If we go on the web, if we see the different situations that we're facing as a society in the on Earth right now, that are happening in many parts of the world, that it's like, really? Do we really have to go through this? People dying of hunger, or different difficulties of life, even here in the U.S., as we consider to be a country that is well developed. We still see many difficulties that it makes us wonder, where's the joy? Where's the joy of leaving sometimes, right? Many people take their lives because of it. But going back to this passage right here, as this child then continued to be under the care of this doctor, one day he asked the doctor to give him more of the pills, the sleeping pills that he would be giving to rest, not because he wanted to sleep, and he mentions because he wanted to make sure he was not disturbing the others who was also under the care of the hospital. And he told the child, after the child asked for it, I can't do that because it may be too drastic and you may die. And he did. In fact, he did. He passed after going through this expiatory time for him. And he went back to the spirit realm. Right after these words, and right after this message, Kardec in this book brings what we just have mentioned here, that is the acknowledgement of God, right? If we see somebody in this difficult situation, we have to go back and analyze where is God on this whole thing. So is he the punishing God who created this heart, this mind, this spirit in this condition, right? It wouldn't be quite the way to think, I wouldn't think, or we wouldn't think. There's got to be once more a pre-existence for him to come to terms with himself and the world as well, the universe, the universal laws that he transgressed. As they continue to explain, as the teachings here, they bring then the evocation of the spirit after he passed, right, to explain what happened. And he said himself, look, I was once, what you saw there was once a man as well that had power, that had money, and I'm paraphrasing now, that had everything of life but did not use well. Used to make others suffer. Used to make others to feel diminished. And I had to go to endure this. I asked to endure such a thing, right? And even though we take this information, we read all the other cases as well that we see with spiritists, we still question, really? Can somebody ask for such a thing, for such a trial? Look at ourselves. Look at ourselves. And we'll get the answer if, in fact, we're truly asking ourselves, because we all have our trials. It may not be like this one, because perhaps we don't have the wide shoulders to receive it yet, because God will give us what we can handle. But we will understand that perhaps we have asked. We have asked. The second idea that I always would like to, in this discussion, we understand God. We understand that God is not this punished being. God has created the natural laws that guide us all, which in this part of the book as well, the Spirit's book, the fourth part, there is a question that's very interesting, that God being so great, and forgive me, I can look for the number and give it to you guys, but God being so great, Kardec asking, I'm once more paraphrasing, will he be concerned about the small things of life? And the Spirits explain the small things and the great things as well. Everything is under his control. Everything is under his guidance. Not only him directly, but the other messengers that has reached a perfect state that helps us in this guidance. For example, we have one, Jesus Christ, and many other mentors, many other helpful guardian angels, if we can say that way. But this is also, this world that we're living now, we're still under the expiatory time, the trial time, right? That we are facing the repercussions or the consequences of what we have created. We came from a world of being primitive, of primitive beings, right? And we transition into this world of trials and expiation. We have said here, we said it last month in many of our talks, and we will say it again because it's important for us to remember. It's important for us to revisit these teachings because it brings us consolation. That when we think about the true happiness that we want to inspire on others, but it's not here yet, being sparked from our hearts, then we have to take a step back and stop judging and really ask ourselves, what am I doing to perhaps go from a world of trials and expiation to a world of a regenerative world where we can really not be happy yet, but be in this moment where, okay, let's give goodness a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, and whatever comes against that, let's try to repel it. We're not happy yet. We're not going to be happy when we conquer this world. We'll be happy right over here, happy worlds, where the good awaits evil, and then perhaps be able to be part of a heavenly or divine world. This is the different categories of inhabited worlds, as we can find the description also in the Gospel according to Spiritism in the 3rd chapter. Another point for us to help us understand the question that we just asked. Can we be completely happy in this world, on planet Earth? No. Right here. Where evil dominates the goodness, it is a world of trial and expiation. How are we going to change? How we can collective or individually and collective work to change is something else that we need to discuss, that we need to see. Number one, that we would like to also bring in this everlasting, or I shouldn't say everlasting, on this realization is that when we look into when we go through a message like this, when we see suffering on others, number one, we don't judge, because Spiritists, they tend to say, oh, you know what? You did something in the past. You see, you're seeing the consequences right now. It's not right. That's not what we're studying here for. It's like quite the contrary. Okay, what can I do to lessen the pain? Because it's not up to us to go and change. I cannot bring shine light on someone's heart directly. I can say something nice. I can give a different perspective, but the person also has to work. The person has to work. Daniel last week brought something really interesting that will help us in this conquest of this new realization, that there are 3 necessary conditions to repair a mistake, since we're talking about this new beginning or new discovery, or perhaps if we have seen it before or not, this new idea. There are 3 necessary conditions. Number 1 is the repentance, right? As we said last week, which is the mitigation of the suffering of expiation, because it opens the door to hope and paves the way to rehabilitation. So when I do something wrong, or against someone, is it enough for someone to say to me, I forgive you, and everything's done? Even if the person says it, I still have to go through this repentance period, right? We still have to go through this moment. The atonement. Is it important to go through the atonement, and why? The atonement consists of the sufferings, both physical and moral, So it could be here, as we will see later on. It could be also on the other side. So we have to go through the repentance, and then we have to go through the atonement. It's that understanding, okay, the person have said, have forgiven me or not, but I still have to atone. I still have to go through that difficult moment. Why is this? Right there. Because it prepares us to do what? It's the third element. Because some people, they may repent very quickly. Some people, they may be reluctant to understand what they have created. And some people, they may go through a long time of atonement because they're thinking too much, because they're going through that sorrow, that difficult moment. And they will get to what? To the reparation, which consists in doing good to those whom we have wronged. It will destroy the cause of our suffering. So we have to go through this. We have to redefine ourselves. We have to rediscover ourselves. The same way Marcel went through as well. He went through these stages to get to the point that he was actually going through, because he was not under the repentance moment anymore, or period of his life. He was not through the atonement anymore. He was already repairing what he had done in the past. But to think that someone has to go through, did he, let's say, do anything against the law, the natural laws, that caused someone to be the same way he was in that previous life, I shouldn't say previous, that life that we described here? Perhaps so. Perhaps he has done something, or he had done something in previous life that put someone in that condition. We're not here to judge. We're not here to debate on it. The fact of the matter is that he came and he said, I asked for this. I asked for this. There are many accounts. Action and Reaction, for example, is a beautiful book that talks about this, the joy and the sorrow. The joy not only in the reparation in the outcome of the reparation, the outcome of the doing good, but in the transition as you go through. And that's one of the key elements that we learn with Spiritism as well. That perhaps, yes, we are here working on what we have not done, or working on something that we have done wrong, but the journey in itself is a joyful journey. Obviously, it depends on how we look at it. It depends on how we take it. Just two questions that we would like to bring that we can find in the Spirit's book that is related to this right here. Does repentance take place in the corporeal or in the spiritual state? And the answer is really interesting. In the spiritual state, but it may also take place in the corporeal state when you clearly comprehend the difference between good and evil. Why did Kardec ask this question? And we do it sometimes too, right? When Jesus came and said, "Go and reconcile with others," as Dion was reading earlier today. We have the choice and we have the chance many times to go ahead and make amends with ourselves, with others, but we choose not to. We delay because of our pride. We delay because of our egotistic ideas. And we keep suffering. We keep delaying it and delaying it. It's very interesting when we see someone error and we say something, look, try to do it in a different way. Try to take a different approach. And you see the person, continuously doing the same thing. And the pain on the process in itself, that you can see ahead, just like a father or a mother with a child, when they're about to do something wrong, they're going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt. And you see, and instinctively we pray that the person may realize sooner or later, or let's say sooner, because the moment that you prolong such a repentance or such a realization, it's the same pretty much that it's going to take for you to atone, and let alone to repair that situation. So we pray. So we say, you know what? I wish it wasn't quite that way. I wish you were not making those decisions. Obviously, when we have the ability to say, when we have the ability to give some kind of guidance. But it can be here. It can be here. It's not only in the spiritual state that we can go through this repentance and say, you know what, an error. I made an error. I did something wrong. Let me go ahead and try to fix it. Is expiation accomplished in the corporeal state or in the spirit state? It is accomplished during the corporeal existence through the trials the spirit must undergo, and in the spirit life through the mental sufferings arising from its state of imperfection. You see what we just mentioned here as far as the moment that the person will have to realize. So when we are in the spiritual world, discarnated, without the physical body, and we look back and say, I could have done this, I could have acted that way, and time goes by, because we have to now allow time for that individual perhaps to discarnate, that individual to, or for providence to just look at us and say, okay, now it's the appropriate time. And that may take sometimes 20, 30, 50, 100 years before we get another chance, before we get an opportunity to, again, do something right with that individual. And again, it is accomplished, as he said, is accomplished here in the corporeal existence, which sometimes it's tough to also to understand or to accept that perhaps, look, I could be way ahead of this situation, but I'm going to have to reincarnate again with the purpose to solely, I shouldn't say solely the purpose, but with the purpose to fix that little issue that was so minor and I made it great. Time wasted, right? Time that we could be using for different things and to allow ourselves to be happier, allow others to be happier as well. So we see that it's with time. It's with time that perhaps we're not going to see the difficulties that we're seeing nowadays. That it's not only myself, but it's also the collectiveness of life. It's not only my family; it's the many families that comprises the nations of the world as well. So let's go back to the question: can human beings enjoy completely happiness while on Earth? Not completely, right? But is there some joy? After we just mentioned these things here, I know it's very limited because, again, we're not going to go over the whole thing. But here's the answer. No, because life has been given to them as either a trial or an expiation. But it depends on them themselves to mitigate their misfortune and be as happy as possible while on Earth. So, the physical body, for example, we see some coughing, we see some with the cold. I'm cold right now. Maybe the AC is on. I don't know. We see the different changes of the seasons, right? Too hot, too cold. We went through, and this is interesting because the other day we were talking about at work about the different mechanism that we have to do things. The internet, for example, right? Let's say 30 years ago or 20 years ago, we did not have the internet the way we have, the source of internet now the way we have. And we were okay. Obviously, we're striving to get better ways to educate ourselves, better ways to help one another, to make information become much faster as it is nowadays. But what happens? Now we have the internet. It's a much better world, but we still complain. We still complain that the computer is not working too fast as we want them to be. We still complain that, it's not enough. Now we're complaining that the kids are on the phone for too long. Now we're complaining that that the connection is falling somewhere or something happened, right? That they didn't see my picture on Facebook. Nobody commented, right? Nobody liked it, right? Thank you. That's why I don't post anything, because I already know they're not going to like it. Thumbs down. So, guys, we're going from one extreme to the other. We didn't have none of these things. We didn't have cars that could drive in the speed that we're driving right now. We're traveling in such a fast way nowadays, and we will travel even faster. But we still find ways to complain. We still find ways to bring sorrows on the joys that we have accomplished. So it's just an insane search for more and more and more, without bringing what we have, exalting. We're looking for more. It's okay to look for more. Otherwise, we wouldn't, transform ourselves. But in a way that we're not troubled. In a way that we're not going crazy about it. But we're not going to stop here. On question 921, Kardec asked, we can understand that man and woman will be happy on earth when they are finally transformed. But meanwhile, it is possible for anyone to enjoy a relative happiness? Kardec wanted to know more. And the Spirit said, most of the time, they are the artisans of their own unhappiness. If they would practice the law of God, they would spare themselves many misfortunes and enjoy a happiness as great as their existence on such a dense plan will allow. Going back to what we were saying, just being in the physical body is already a trial, is already a difficult situation. You guys don't want to be tall like Leo, because it hurts sometimes. And some people also, they are short, but they also have back pain. Some people, they have different anomalies or difficulties that they have to face. That is the same thing, a weak immune system, right? Some people, they just lack certain necessities that we don't have. And that's one of the great parts, one of the great ways for us to go back and say, look, perhaps I have this pain, but it could be worse. We joke sometimes, it's part of life. It's part of having a physical body, right? It's part of doing this. It's part of doing that. In a joyful way, so we can remind ourselves that this is temporary, because the physical body is temporary. What we're seeing is temporary. This, especially when we talk about the material joys, it's very temporary. That's why we don't need to get attached to it. We can't get attached to it, because one day we're going to lose it, as we will lose the physical body. We will look back and say, you know what? It served the time. Now I have to move on. Now I have to plan, or let's say, now I have to plan a different reincarnation, a new reincarnation. But we can also be proactive and say, what am I doing with it now? As I'm going through this triumphal moment, this expiation, whatever that be, or this reparation that I have to come in contact with, what am I doing? Am I planting the right seeds for the next reincarnation? Because everything that we do now is going to plan the future. As the fruits that we're reaping right now, they're from the seeds that we planted years ago, in this lifetime and in previous life as well. So we have to really create this proactive mind and futuristic mind, if we can say that way, to project ourselves into the future, having the hope in the future, having the hope in the tomorrow as well. Here's something to calm ourselves in both in the physical or in the moral sense of the way. The Spirit explains to us, as an answer for question 922, that the common standard of happiness for everyone in the material existence is the possession of all that is necessary. For the moral life, it is the good conscience and faith in the future, as we just mentioned. So why do we bring this part of, among many others that we can talk about it, right? We saw at the beginning, what Kardec goes through. Because we're living in this life that we are the essence, the spirits, right? But we're also inserting this physical body. So don't tell me that not having or having a car is a bad thing. Is it? No, it's not. Depends on how we project ourselves for that car, or how that car dictate our lives. It's not bad to have a good job, to go to school, to learn, or to have the elements that we have right now in this Spiritist center. Being humble doesn't mean that we're not going to have anything, that we're going to walk with holes in our clothes, right? With, lacking this, lacking that. No, we have to have some dignity. Now, the extremes is the issue that we have to put ourselves away from it. But we can all say, too, a phone nowadays is the extreme. Do you need to be connected with the world 24/7, as we are capable with the phone nowadays? Could be an extremes, but it depends on how you're connected. It depends what you're using, the mechanism that we have nowadays to connect with the world. Because we could be connecting with a relative, with a person who is somewhere, who is ahead of us, and they text us in the middle of the night, "Hey, how are you?" Really? At this time? But then you say, how are you back? And, all those things. But I could also be using to post the pictures, as we mentioned here, and we're laughing before, right? To show off or to do things that are just foolish, right? To ourselves. So the possession of the necessities. This is necessary for me, for this transition. And as we grow, we'll see that even some of the things that we now try to justify, later on, it's not going to be, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. We were talking about this topic in our studies of the Gospel according to Spiritism this past Thursday when we took a trip to Monticello. Even though we see that the man who created the beautiful house and the structure and all those things, or the people who lived at that time, were very limited in the sense of the material they have this futuristic mind. Who knows? Maybe they came with a better understanding that we do nowadays of life, and they were content with the little things that they had, and they did whatever they had to do. They worked in different conditions. They were content. Did they complain? Perhaps, but we have to analyze and go back and say, if we go back years and years ago, things were tougher and people still lived. People still had a better life most of the time than we have nowadays when we're falling into the tribulations of life. And here's another part that we would like to bring from this as well, that the wealthiest are really those who have fewer needs. And this can go on both ways. Not only on the material existence that the Spirit mentions here, but also in the moral life. Because I can ask for a bunch of things, materialistic speaking. As well as, morally speaking, I could be a very demanding person. I want this way, I want that way. I don't like the chair to be that way, right? We see people that they have this controlling idea of life. It has to be this way or else. And we see not only the fights in the between nations, but we also go back and minimize things to a certain degree that we see the same fights, we see the same wars in the families, in the hearts of others, the extremists. When we go and say, it has to be this way. We have to go to this country and do this. We have to do that, go there. We have to, close our borders. We have to do all these things. I'm not trying to get political here, but we get the sense. We get the idea. Where, again, the needs that we create within ourselves is what destroys us, is what puts us in a condition that we will have to come back and readdress not only sometimes what we make, but what we think and what we say. Because people are listening, people are with one, we're always connected with someone, not only through the different ways of the internet, but we're connected mentally, spiritually speaking. And if we are here, inserted in this planet of trials and expiation, we will also, there is a reason behind. So we're here collective. We're here because we need to work together. Not only individually, if we do individually, consequently, we'll also help others as well in different senses. But we're here to work collectively too. This is us. This is us. We're living the happy life, right? And then we're like, oh my God, I have done something wrong. And then we fall into this idea of guilt, right? On the idea that, oh my God, I have done something wrong. Please, yeah. So we can picture better. This is us, right? We're in the past thinking that, okay, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to do everything that I want to do, have fun. And then we get near that moment of losing the physical body. And we're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have played so much. I shouldn't have, have so much fun. I wasted my time. I didn't learn anything. And we discarnate and we get to the other side. We're sad. We're sad. What have I done? Now I need to reincarnate and fix everything. The message towards this end, the end of the Spirit's book, is for us to do the following. Right over here, to invert the situation. Kirsten, again, if you want to, is to invert the whole thing. Let's change. We know that we're coming from a tough moment, right? Because we are not perfect. It's okay. We understand our limitations. And this can be also applied in our lifetime now, where we just erred. I just made an error. I'm going to go ahead and go through the moment that I have to realize, I have to pre-plan again, I have to do all the things. But we can see the outcome and be happy. Thank you, Kirsten. You can put it up. We'll be able to see the outcome and be happy about it. Even though we see, as we analyze all the difficulties of life, of looking at someone as Marcel and say, poor person, how can this be? What all these things? We forget that behind the ashes, or before the ashes of a fire, right, that the fire creates, there's the fire in itself. So destruction, there is a reason for the destruction. If we came to a destructive condition, there is a reason for it. And that is not God. Because God did not create us that way. God does not want us to be that way. It's the opposite. God created us to be happy, reconciliatory, right, joyful, with the difficulties that we have on earth, but to see a different beginning, to create a different beginning for ourselves. So when we go through the list of things that we saw at the beginning, right? When we have someone who perhaps we have been reincarnated with, or we have lived with for many years, that we don't click too well. When we see people, mothers, for example, losing their kids, when we see the different sorrows of life, the different difficulties of life, we can then analyze with different eyes. And seeing on the reparation a joyful journey as well. Because the worst thing is when the individual wakes up in the morning and they have to say, gosh, I have to go to work again. Gosh, and then they get to work and they're complaining about the work. And then they leave work, they're mad-mouthing the people who they just left. We should be joyful. We should be joyful. You know what? I have this job. It's tough. I confess. It's tough. It's not easy to deal with this person, that person. Let's be true to ourselves. We don't want to create in ourselves a person that is, or a world that is really doesn't exist. Face the situation, but what can we do with that situation? Or how can we plan a better job or to get somewhere? And it's the same thing with family members, the same thing with friends, brothers and sisters that we find in our lives, the situations, the different situations of life, the different Marcels of life as well, right? That is inside of us sometimes, screaming to say something or to do something. And sometimes we do very difficult things, creating more problems for the future, which is also another teachings of this part of the Spirit's book. We create more issues in our current life than we resolve the issues of past lives because of our pride, because of our egotistic way as well. So it's taking this proactive step, taking this reconciliatory with ourselves and God as well, not judging anybody, not judging God and saying, you created this in my life. No. Okay, I have a problem. Let's go ahead and fix it. How can I fix it? Because sometimes we're in the middle of the situation. It's tough. We don't see it. Ask for help. Ask for this idea. We would like, before we open for questions, because we can talk about it, the rest of the night, of what we have learned, of what we have read, but it's never enough or eloquent as what the Spirit brings to us. And after this message, there is actually a message from after the actual case of Marcel. There is a teaching brought to the medium of the Spirit, who came and said, all right, let me go ahead and explain or give our take on this case that we see as a difficult moment. Okay, so we can soothe our hearts. I would like to finish in a positive note, because sometimes talking about the sorrows is not easy. Sometimes talking about the joys that I do not have or others do not have, it's pretty difficult too, because we envy, we wish it could be the different ways, right? So here's the message. Instructions by the medium's guide. Poor, weak, ulcerated, and deformed little sufferer. How many cries of anguish he uttered in an asylum of misery and tears. And despite his tender age, how resigned he was, and how much his soul comprehended the purpose of suffering. He felt that the reward for so many stifled groans awaited him beyond the grave. Also, how he prayed for those who didn't have the courage to bear the maladies as he had, and especially for those who cast blasphemies at heaven instead of prayers. Although his agony had been long and drawn out, his moment of death was not that dreadful. Of course, his convulsed limbs contorted, displaying to those watching over him a deformed body revolting against death, the law of the flesh that wants to live in spite of itself. But an angel hovered over his deathbed and healed his heart. Afterward, that angel bore in its white wings that beautiful soul, which freed itself from its deformed body, uttering these words, "Glory to you, my God." And that soul, ascending towards the Almighty, exclaimed, "Here I am, Lord. You gave me the mission of learning how to suffer. Have I borne the trial worthily?" And now the spirit of that poor child has resumed its true proportions. It hovers in space, going to the weak and humble, saying to all, "Have hope and courage, freed from all matter and all impurities. He is next to you. He speaks to you in a voice that is no longer suffering and mournful, but virile. He says to you, 'Those who beheld me saw a child who did not complain. They have drawn a balm for their ills from my example, and their hearts have been strengthened with sweet trust in God.' Such was the purpose of my short passage on earth," by St. Augustine. He's bringing again to us the purpose of actually going through that difficult moment. He's bringing his purpose. Was his purpose to expiate something or repair something from the past, as we thought at the beginning? Or was it to give an example of consolation for others on how we should endure our joys, on how we should endure our sorrows as well? And I'm talking about the joys, earthly joys, because we get so attached to it and then we suffer in the future. It's still joyful, don't take me wrong, but what's the attachment that we have? What about the sorrows? When we go through the different quote unquote punishments that we sometimes we think that we are, the eternal punishments because of our guilt feelings. We have done something so wrong that we think that the sorrow or the punishment should be forever. So here it is, an example for us to go back and remember this distorted little child that did everything that he could, even ask for more medicine for him to sleep, not to trouble the hearts of others with his crying, with his difficulties that he was living. A different type of suffering, a different type of way of seeing life, way of seeing sorrows. So with this, we invite everyone again to read this part of the book, to go back and visit some of these in this part of the chapter of the Gospel Court, of Heaven and Hell, when Kardec brings all these difficult minds that went in a very troubled way, and they came back to tell us life is not what I thought it was. Life is what we can make it of it now and change it now. If I can repent now, if I can expiate now, and if I can repair now, why not? Is it going to hurt? Yes, it will. Are we going to try to find our ways to say, no, it's too hard? Yes, we will. But it's very important for us to say, okay, when it seems hard, I'm going to try it. I'm going to do it until I get it right. Until others are able also to benefit from this too. It's not only me. It's not only my evolution. When we're living on a planet of trials and expiation, where we're considerably now thinking about, okay, you know what? I'm going to sit down to have dinner with my family when I know that perhaps a brother or sister is suffering, then the happiness is a different happiness. We still have a long way to go. We still have a lot of work to do, many things to change, but it starts with us. It starts with each one of us. Because perhaps the taste of that food that I'm going to have with my family members that, thank God, we have nowadays, would be much better if we knew that others were not going through the difficulties that are going. It's the same thing. Like, would you rather eat alone or with a group of people that you're talking, you really having that nice meal, right? It's the same thing of life. Joy is the same way. And until then, we will reap our sorrows. If we're still connected with the drastic of ways of life, we'll reap our sorrows. So we would like to open for a couple questions, a couple comments if you have. This is just for something to have on the screen. Nothing related to the talk. Hopefully I can bring some enlightenment of what we have learned and what we have read at this part of the Spirit's book and Heaven and Hell as well. But we would like to open if you would like to make a question or a comment. Anyone?
Thank you. It works? Okay. I just really wanted to weave in something that happened in the news this week, that Malala, the 17-year-old from Pakistan, was the co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. I was curious what the younger people thought of her, I guess as an example of moral courage. I'm not trying to put words into their thinking. And also how she represents trials and expiation and how she turned it around.
Okay. Question. The younger ones, would you like to answer it? Would you like to answer it?
I saw that she was, and I thought that was marvelous. And thank you, Paul. That's a wonderful feedback for the talk today. I think it really embodies this whole talk, because I think recently on our Thursday study here, a gentleman by the name of Marcelo came and he restated a quote that the worst cancer of society is the cancer of comparison. So by comparison, if we think about her life is miserable. We think compared to ours, because or myself, I have comfort. I don't have to strive for what to be equal in the eyes of the society in which I live in, but she does. So happiness, and it's also a comment that I wanted to make, happiness, it depends on your definition of what that is. I think Malala is, I can't think of the word, she's just paving a new way, in as much as 1,500 years ago or hundreds of years ago, people were paving the way. Socrates was paving a way for a new way of thinking, for a newer society, redefining what life is for young girls, what life is for women, what our roles are supposed to be in comparison to what they are, and how that relates to our happiness. So, a couple hundred years ago, if as a single woman, if I wasn't already married by a certain age and bearing children, then my life more than likely would have been miserable. My happiness scale of 1 to 10 would have probably been a -5. But nowadays, that's not true anymore, depending upon what your definition of happiness is. But I think as a general whole, that's not expected. So I think it really depends upon our perspective on life. And that's, I think, the beauty of Spiritism. And also my own comment was that I couldn't help but think that by the very nature of the planet and the level that we are in, complete happiness from God's perspective, we wouldn't even want that. I mean, complete happiness would mean perhaps maybe giving up things that we now have, but we're not at that stage yet. We need this experience that we're enduring, and my perspective of what total happiness is may not be the best for me at this point in time. Just like someone who's enduring a sickness, you don't want that sickness when you're enduring it, and yet it's a needed experience. And yet inversely, when you mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing the microphone, but one last thing. Inversely, if we think about Thomas Jefferson, I think you're mentioning him, and Monticello, at his time, it was necessary for him to see that need to want to progress. And in the Spirit's book, or in the Gospel according to Spiritism, in the Gospel it says that the difference between us and animals is that humans at this level, we have an incessant desire for progress. So there is always going to be some level of, I don't want to say unhappiness, but this desire for something more. So, but you really got to balance that, because you don't want to go to the dark side, because I don't have another way to find a definition, to go too off the beaten path and look for material things. But I think in the way and the nature of God creates things, eventually we will find our way.
Dan, thank you. Those are great comments. And no wonder we're here, right? No wonder we have made thus far. Otherwise, we would be in the primitive world. And that's the beauty of, how do I find balance? How do I find the courage to deal with the darkness of life? And one of the things that we get to be reminded on this aspect of life, aspect of the book in life, is that we're still taking baby steps on being courageous. So much so that evil, they're very smart. And when we have to be courageous and do the right thing, we tend to say, oh no, it's not for that person's moment. No, we have to be courageous. When we take the approach that the right is right and that's what should be done, then things will change. Then we'll make the change that we're supposed to make as well. And that goes back to Paula's question on this. Perhaps, yes, we live in the horrible conditions of life, on the difficulties of life, but God, as helping us, and Jesus being the governor of earth, they send these very strong-willed minds in the good way, not in the negative way, to come and persist, to come and say, enough is enough. I have to do my part. I have to study. I have to become an example, as Marcel was, right? And bring some change, bring some realizations to others who are watching. It's putting a meaning to our lives. that's when we then start considering a missionary or a mission, because we can get up every day of our lives and say, you know what, yeah, I'll get up and go to work, do whatever, come back. But when we put a meaning, okay, why am I going to work? Why am I doing this? Why am I studying math? Why am I studying? And you put that meaning behind the action, then it becomes a mission. It is easier as well to endure the difficulty that we have to endure. Like this young lady, like many others, this young person, like many others have endured as well. Searching for the greatness of life and not falling into the temptations to look or go into the extremes of life. When I say the extremes here, in our level, it could be both. Because some people think that being spiritualized is to segregate ourselves from the rest of the world. Or being or not being materialistic is not really dealing with matter at all. No, we're here to perfect ourselves and perfect matter as well. So that's the idea, is to find this balance, I think, Paula, it's a great reminder for all of us to truly think what is the reason why we're here. The kids as well. Us, the big kids too, right? When we look at them and say that they have to be what we were not. They have to be a successful lawyer, or they have to be a this or that type of person. We have to look for the essence. What's inside? What can the person do well that perhaps will not cause sufferings in the future? That this person later on will look at me and say, my father, he wanted me to be this, but I don't want to do this. I don't want to be this person in life. The same way sometimes we go through these, troubles in life, that we accuse our parents of things we really don't want to be, or the ways that we are nowadays. It's up to us to free ourselves. But that's the idea. That's the invitation for us as we give continuation to our moment tonight. As we receive the passage tonight, we would like to invite one another to really think, what do we have? Put on our scales right now. The joys and sorrows of life. Temporary, the long-lasting ones, the everlasting joys, right? But also the sorrows, as Kirsten mentioned. Can we perceive the sorrows as a moment of evolution, as a trial that will take me to a better location? People who go hiking, right, to the great altitudes, they have to walk for a long time, hours sometimes. They go through thirst. They go through the painful moments. The legs are hurting. Sometimes they get cold to get to where? To the high altitude where they can see the whole thing and they're like, wow, this is really beautiful. So there is work to be done to get to that level where we see things from up above, and we're not going to be idle. We're going to be working as the higher mentors, the enlightened beings are doing right now, helping us. Then we go back and we do what? We go back down the same path and we start helping those individuals, right? Giving them better clothes, giving them better shoes, giving them some water. That's what we will do when we find the eternal joy that we are supposed to find. So we would like to go ahead and close right here and really think about these joys and sorrows as we receive the passes. We'll ask, Kirsten, can you shed the light, and we'll